the USA to come and be with us today. Dr. Barry Morton is not a stranger to Botswana. He actually schooled at Thornhill and he became a tennis star. This is in the Botswana junior tennis team. I believe the BNOC recognized him when I was 3 years old as as their sportsman of the year. He actually trended to the academic after that, and then though his roots were firmly placed and planted in Botswana, he ended up at Ohio University. He did his master's as well as his PhD at Indiana University, and that's where he wrote his doctoral thesis on the social and economic history of colonial Ngamiland. So apart from the teaching stints at the University of KwaZulu-Natal as well as the Indiana University, you'll know the name Barry Morton because he collaborated with our very own Jeff Ramsey, and they produced the first biography of the late Sir Quett Masire, and also the biography of Fish Gietzing and the historical dictionary of Botswana, and then alongside again Jeff and Themba Mgadla. So a history of Botswana from 1800 to 1910. And I want to believe that it was not really much of a surprise when the late former President Masire approached Dr. Morton to research and write up the book that we are here to hear about today. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, please help me with a round of applause called to our podium, Dr. Barry Morton.
Thank you so much for being here. You know, one day, you're just a lowly academic sitting in your house grading papers, you know, online. And then you get a phone call out of nowhere, you know, from a young lady in the audience here, Masire, saying that the ex-president would like you to come over and write a book for him or help him write a book. And then I said to Masakua, well, this is not a very good time. I'm in the middle of the semester, and next month we're selling our house, and we're moving to another city. And then she said, well, it sounds very difficult, but you know, Mr. Masire really needs you to come here now and get going on this project. So, how can you say no to someone like Quett Masire? It's not possible. Not only is he definitely the most important person in the history of this republic, but I think he's also the most incredible person you could ever meet. Okay, so I quit my jobs, left my wife to deal with the hassles of our move, and I came over and got started. And I still remember very clearly on the first day when we went upstairs into his residence. And you know, after the pleasantries, he just said, put all your stuff down there on the table. And then he came, sat across from me and looked at me right in the eye. And he said, these are the things that this book is going to be about. And so what I want to do now, especially the two major things he wanted to go over, we're going to go over that right now. Next one. No. The previous one, there we go. The first thing, the thing that weighed most heavily on Sir Ketumile's mind were the lies and distortions that had been told about him by his former colleague, Mr. David Mahang. Okay. And a lot of Mr. Mahang's information had come from scurrilous innuendo spread by another one of Mr. Masire's former colleagues, Mr. Mutlakola Nwako, which had been circulating for decades, somewhat unchallenged underground. Now, Mr. Masire he was not one of those people who was that irritated by criticism of him. He viewed a lot of criticism of him from various quarters. It's kind of like, you know, those impala that stay in the long grass and snort at you when you come by. Just irritating, but not very important or dangerous. However, he noted that nobody had come forward organically to challenge the version of the early BDP and Masire's early career that had been put forward by Mr. Mahang. So he wanted me to refute, not only refute the Masipa put forward by Dr. Mahang, he not only wanted me to refute that, but he wanted to make sure that it was clear the central role that he had played in not only the formation of the BDP, but in the early government policies that had so much contributed to Botswana's success in the long term. Okay, so this, a big part of the book then deals with this topic. The second topic he wanted to deal with what happened to Dom Krach. In 2017, when we started this, it was evident to Sir Ketumile, though he was a loyal and paid-up member to the end, that something was seriously going wrong with the political party that he helped co-found under a tree in what is now the American Embassy, not too far from here. The beginning of the end, he believed, or the beginning of the glory period for the BDP, which incidentally is the most successful political party in independent Africa. The beginning of its downfall, he believed, were the introduction of primary elections, or Bulela Ditswe, in 2002. He believed that the holding of primaries for parliamentary constituencies led not only to increased rivalry between party members, but it also led to the introduction of pay-to-play and big money into the system, which had then led to increased and unrelenting other kinds of shenanigans, which had really disrupted the success of Dom Krach. That was one element of the situation. He also believed strongly that the leadership of the BDP, which had emerged after about 2008, had become out of touch with the ordinary membership and was no longer in consultation or in close coordination with the mass of the membership. And what was the result of this new top-down, deaf approach to the membership? Ultimately, it led to the Homolimo Motsoaledi faction, and 20% of the electorate leaving the BDP forever, which he believed was an unforced error of enormous magnitude. He didn't think that the BDP would ever recover from that. So, as a result, and he wanted to distinguish between that and the second BDP, which has existed since 2002. He believed that they were both very distinct creatures, and he really, although he was a loyal, paid-up party member to the end, he only really believed in the first BDP. And I think the question that he posed was this: which system, or let me go back, he did not believe that it was undemocratic for the party membership to select a committee which would then go and identify good parliamentary candidates and then see if the local constituencies would accept them or view them as being acceptable in each constituency. So he believed that a central committee should identify and recruit good candidates if they were acceptable to the local party memberships. So the question he posed to me was this: which system is going to recruit the best people? Is it going to be Bulela Ditswe, or is it going to be the senior party membership going and finding the best talent in the country? You know, which system is going to put forward someone like Hautsi Tsue Chiepe or Festus Mohai to the public, or which system is going to bring forward a PG Matante? Well, I think he was unequivocal in saying that the way the first BDP did it, where the leadership selected the candidates, would bring forward the best. So those, I think, are the two things, the two categories that he was desperate to bring forward to the country. However, the book goes over other detail. So let's move to the next one. And I think I wanted to use my access to Sir Ketu Mile and to the many others of his colleagues who helped me to identify some of the things that were most important to him that are not generally recognized. I didn't want to just go and repeat the same old stuff. What is it about Sir Ketu Mile really that we need to remember now? What can take us forward? Or what is still, how can we best understand him? So they say a picture can paint 1,000 words. When Sir Ketu Mile this was very early on before he became a politician, he became an editor of a newspaper, Naledi ya Botswana. And they sent him out to write stories all over the protectorate, and they also gave him a camera. And this was one of the first pictures he ever took and published. These are the old men of the Kotla in Kanye. And it's strange, why would he, when he's just starting out as a journalist, why would he publish this picture with his cheap Kodak? What would lead him to do that? And I think the meaning was deep and clear. So when Sir Ketu Mile was 5, 6 years old, in 1930, his father and his uncles at 4 a.m. would drag him to Kotla every day. Every day he was in Kanye, he went to Kotla from the age of 6 years old on. And what did he learn there? Well, he told me that that's where he was educated. You know, he went to Tiger Kloof, etc., but where was he really educated? He was educated in the Kanye Kotla. And he could remember, even at the age of 90, the names of the old men that he saw in the early 1930s that he heard discussing court cases, policies. And these old men could relate back to the events, you know, back to the age of Botswana I in the 1850s. So he was educated as a young man in the politics and the tradition of the Bangwa Ketsi going back what is now almost two centuries. And he said that these men were giants of the mind, giants of the mind. In other words, he believed that a lot of them were smarter, more sagacious, and more brilliant than most of the people that were appointed to the high court under his jurisdiction. Okay, so Quett Masire believed deeply that this democratic tradition was what he was there to protect. So, think of it now, a couple of years after he took this picture. He and Seretse, the leaders of the BDP, meeting in some dusty bar on the side of the road in Mahalapi or some such place for their weekly meeting. What is it that they said to each other by themselves? What they said was this: our tradition, the way we run government, the way we've learned to exploit the resources of this region collectively for the last 1,000 years. This tradition is going to make us richer than Rhodesia and South Africa. This was when there were no tarred roads in the country. So, as Masire and Seretse used to say to themselves, they called themselves conservatives. As conservatives, we are going to use our tradition to take us forward, and we're going to be richer than South Africa and Rhodesia. They knew it then, and they never stopped believing it. So how does this kind of affect us here now? I was thinking of one good example that would come home to all of you. In the run-up to independence, Masire, Seretse, and the BDP leadership decided that they wanted to get rid of communal land and make all of Botswana private property. They wanted every Botswana to own their own private land. How long? Sorry, I'm skipping over myself. They wanted all Botswana to own their own private land, and there would be no more communal land. How many of you today own private land? How many of you today own private land? All of you. However, they had to be careful, because by turning communal land into private land, there was potential for massive disruption and opposition to them in general from many different quarters. So what is it they decided to do? How did they decide to build the new kraal on top of the old kraal? They just did it very carefully. So from the beginning, the chiefs were taken off the land board, or they were put on the land board, then they were removed from the land board, People got their allocations. And this went better for some people than others, as Mr. Kwelahobe would know. Okay? Everyone here has a story about how they had to go through the whole land board process to get this plot and that plot. Everyone here's got a huge history, and you could all tell me for hours how that went. I've heard it a million times. This was all by design. It wasn't meant to be fast. It was meant to be slow, and gradually, over the decades, everyone would get their paper and own their own land. And in that way, not only would people have more security and more freedom by owning their land, but they would also be able to utilize that asset. They could utilize that asset to further their education, their business, or simply to live unmolested by other people. Okay? This program has been implemented as slowly as it has occurred with no opposition. And I think Sir Kedumile said to me something like this: well, everyone needs to get their paper as soon as possible because it needs to be over right now. It's done. Okay? So there was this real, all of Sir Kedumile's policies aimed, even if making big changes, to maintain Botswana's social traditions without undue interruption, because the tradition was what he believed made the country strong, not anything else, not the diamonds or whatever. Next slide. The last part of the book deals with Sir Kedumile's involvement in the Congo peace process for about 3.5 years, from 1999 to mid-2003. The details are hard to explain, but let's just say in the late 1990s, war broke out in the Congo. Laurent Kabila overthrew Joseph Mobutu. Then more wars broke out. There were invasions from Rwanda and from Zimbabwe. And there were troops from 6 nations all fighting at the same time in the same country, trying to carve up all these resources. And eventually they fought themselves to a standstill after 1 or 2 years, roughly in 1999. Somewhere between 200,000 to 1 million people were killed in one way or another, either in the fighting or from some of the worst atrocities seen in Africa. So the combatants, 6 countries, signed an agreement saying that they would agree to have a peacemaker come in and help them hammer out an agreement. So after deliberation by, Africa's senior leaders, Nyerere, Mbeki, the OAU, they decided on Sir Ketumile to come and be the peacemaker in the Congo. So when Sir Kedumile went to ask President Masire for permission to engage in this project, President Masire told him, don't do it. There was a crisis in the Congo when we were children. There's a crisis in the Congo now, and there'll be a crisis in the Congo when we're in the ground. But Sir Kedumile said he was going to do it, even though it was, in his words, mission impossible. Mission impossible. Thabo Mbeki had said, this is the African Renaissance is going on now. if we, and Masire agreed because SADC, which he had been the chairman of for many, many years, wished to have a new and prosperous Congo as part of the SADC. So Sekhetumile really wanted to give it a try, even though he didn't really believe he could make it happen. So picture yourself then. You're given the job of going and implementing a peace accord and trying to get people to agree to a constitution in one of the biggest failed states in Africa, where you have 6 different countries with their armies. You have hordes of people with guns going around and killing each other who aren't even working at the behest of these 6 outside forces. And you have no money, you have no power, and no position. You're just going to go there, you're going to show up, and you're going to try and convince all these people to get together and come up with a new constitution and go forward as a brand new country. What are the odds of success? Very low. But he tried anyway because he just believed it was his duty to Africa really to do it. So when he started off, he was humiliated relentlessly by the Kabila government. They refused to let him get on airplanes. When he'd show up, they'd make him like the version of their state house. They'd make him wait at the gate for hours before they'd come and fetch him. Then they'd make them walk up these long roads towards the state house in the middle of the daytime, you know, when it's really hot out. You know, Congo's hotter than Botswana, trust me. So then they'd make him wait, you know. President Kabila said that Masire was like the fly who's entering into the king's banquet. He refused to help him. They humiliated him in the press, told lies. You know, the mafia networks that controlled the Congo, you know, had the Belgian and French newspapers writing lies about Masire. So you've got no money. The OAU, which promised you funds, never gives you a dime. You've got some loans from Festus Mohai and some help from Ian Kama and the BDF to give you some phones and some planes maybe, and you've got some personnel. How are you going to solve this problem when the dictator of the country won't even talk to you? Well, I think that the answer is that Sekhetumile, he went back to what he knew best, what he tried to protect for all these decades, which was the Botswana democratic tradition. And so there was a feature of this ceasefire that these countries had made, which provided for a constitutional conference in which 40% of the attendees were supposed to be members of the political opposition and other organizations in the country. So if Laurent Kabila was going to roadblock Masire, well, he just decided to go straight to the Congolese people himself. How would you like to be involved in this constitutional and peace process? And so him and his associates who he began to hire, moved all over the Congo and began to just ask for input and to meet all interested organizations who would like to be part of this peace process. So all over the Congo, when he would arrive in his plane or his Russian helicopter, thousands of people would emerge to come and try and see him. So his hotel room, his makeshift offices were besieged from morning till night with Congolese trying to be part of this process. And he and his team went all over the country and met thousands of people, and they talked with them through the night, just as if it was a Domkirche General Conference. And so, in this way, Masire built up a democratic groundswell to support his efforts in the face of the indifference of the major combatants. Now, I don't want to try and go into more details, but again, a picture paints 1,000 words. So what is this picture right here? Here we've got Seketumile. We're on a remote mountaintop somewhere in the Congo. I have no idea where. And there they were meeting this man, Jean-Pierre Bemba, who at this time, with the help of the Ugandan army and many of the remaining Mobutuist mafias, controlled the northern third of the Congo. This man, at the time of the meeting, was under indictment of the International Criminal Court for genocide and many other human rights abuses. His troops had killed systematically tens of thousands of people. Yet Seketumile had to come up with a way to get him to agree to, in a sense, give up his power and come to an agreement with all these other warring parties. They all had to give something up for the betterment of their own country. Now, look at how it's going down. Seketumile is just sitting with him out there on deck chairs like, we're in the, I don't know. We're somewhere in Botswana sitting under a tree talking. Bemba is laughing. He thinks Seketumile is funny and humorous. Is there any better way diplomatically that you think you could get a warlord like this to cooperate? I don't think so. I think this picture to me, it proves just how good Seketumile was at getting big coalitions to go along and move in a single direction. Let's say we put Homolemo Motsoaledi in this chair. Would he and the BMD have left Domkirche if they'd sat down with President Masire like this? The answer is never. To cut the story short, it's time to bring it to a close. President Masire, with these heroic efforts, with no power, no money, with no position, was able to bring the Congolese to two consecutive conferences where he arranged for representatives from the masses of the Congolese as well as from all these warring parties, and he got them together to talk twice. Unfortunately, he could not bring the matter to a conclusion because there was so much dark and evil money flowing from all over the world that was getting involved in the process. And it was way easier for the big shots to get corrupted by big payouts from France, Belgium, the US, or Israel rather than to cooperate. And this was something that, despite having two conferences, Masire could not overcome. Next one. So in the end, Thabo Mbeki became involved in the process, and the warring parties met in Sun City where they eventually had an accord. And then they came up with a new constitution, and elections were held in the Congo in 2006. So I believe Masire's efforts, heroic, did an immense amount of good for the Congo, and whether the Congo is a better place now than it was then, I leave to you to decide. that's what I came here to say, guys. Thank you so much for attending. The book's available here. If you don't have any money right now, it's available at the Botswana Society or even at Exclusive Books. I'd be willing to take any questions.
All right. So I think if anyone from the family wants to start first, if you have any questions, comments, queries, do we have any?
Thank you very much. I was actually going to reserve my comments till the very last, but let me say it anyway. And it's more commentary than question, so just give me a minute or two, if you will. I think, first of all, Barry, my apologies to your wife. I distinctly remember the call and the abrupt nature of having to. And I remember when you came here, I did ask, how is the house move coming along? And of course, you were out here. I also just wanted to underscore a little bit of what you had said, that indeed, in the latter years of Re, he was very concerned about some of the things that he saw around him. And he had wanted, as Barry has indicated, to talk to somebody who can do some of the historical research to give a proper and effectual context to some of what was happening. He had a sense of urgency about the messages that he needed to communicate. And he also felt very strongly about what he saw as an erosion of some of the values and understanding that he felt needed to be underscored. In his first book, he had not had the opportunity to address his time in the DRC. And so, as Barry has indicated, he not only wanted to talk about what he saw happening on the national front, but he also wanted, for our sake, for the sake of Botswana, to be able to understand what the DRC initiative had been about. And so he wanted to share that as well. So my comments are really just to thank Barry for his commitment to the project, and to acknowledge that indeed there was an engagement and a trust that was developed during that process, and to just thank him on behalf of the family for bringing his ideas to light. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure, Rekwela Hobi, if I can hand you this mic as well. If we have, okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Let me introduce myself, Botsalo Ntuane. Obviously, this is going to be a very interesting book. Just, I think about a month ago or so, we buried President Quett Masire, at which a number of us here were present. And from your initial remarks, obviously you're not going into detail. We are going to have to read for ourselves. Why do I think this sounds like a hagiography? A puff piece, a PR exercise. Like I say, I am yet to read the book. And by the way, let me not be misconstrued. I'm considered a Masirite consistently over the years. So I come from a standpoint that he's been this monumental historic figure in whose values some of us still stand by, especially when it comes to nation building, especially when it comes to resource allocation and the development of Botswana's welfare state, which I think really came to the fore during the Masire years. But such a huge monumental figure cannot be given a linear treatment. Surely there are contradictions. There are complexities. Let's take, you highlighted the year 2002 as the dichotomy between the perfect BDP, in quotes, the Masire BDP, and then post-2002, the new BDP, which eventually led to what happened, the catastrophe of October 2024. In your conversations, did Raiso attribute some blame to himself for engineering the ascendancy of Festus Mogai? Engineering in the sense of parachuting him into the presidency through the amendment of 2 constitutions. I was involved in all these processes. I was there physically. I took part, even if I were, at that time, very young, as a young activist. But at least I was in the venues where these things took place or were discussed. And there are those who will argue that, without taking up too much time, that yes, you cannot blame the post-2002 cohort for what eventually happened to BDP because you bear culpability. You engineered a constitutional amendment that fast-tracked a newcomer into national leadership, into the presidency. That's just food for thought. Essentially, I'm trying to illustrate my point at the beginning that, is this a hagiography? Is it a PR piece, book, where essentially we are saying there are lots of issues that I think need to be told before my demise. Can you come and do a public relations piece for me? Obviously, the reviewers of the books, the political scientists who are here, they'll delve into it as we go along. But just the part in short, the Congo peacekeeping, I think that was an exercise in futility, really. President Masire had no business getting involved in the Congo. First of all, I mean, let's just look at the cultural linguistic differences. Do you imagine little Botswana, far away, at the southern end of the continent? I think it can resolve these generational old problems that have bedeviled such a huge behemoth like Zaire, like DRC. So it is not a surprise that, again, I mean, Masire right, but I'm being critical about, because I think this is supposed to be the kind of forum, right? In that regard, his efforts failed in DRC. They failed, and probably I sound harsh, he had no business in DRC. I think he should have expended his efforts in other endeavors, particularly the nation-building project here in Botswana. But like I'm saying, I just wanted to highlight those matters. I'll read the book, and possibly I'll follow up with a written review.
Not running away from my son.
He was involved, actually. He has a lot to say about some of these developments, especially automatic succession. But let me just leave it there. Thank you very much. Yes.
We'll start with the end first. He had no business being in the Congo. That's what President Masire told him. That's what many people told him. He didn't do it because he was self-appointed. He did it because he was asked, and he felt it was his duty to try. Yeah, he didn't speak French, he didn't speak Lingala, he didn't speak Swahili. You know, he had to go with interpreters, or, you know. He felt that, so he hired people who had the right, you know, the right diplomacy, who could help him. But yes, President Masire didn't think he should go, but he didn't listen to him. I mean, he just felt he had the duty, you know, to do it. He didn't make any money from it. He wasted years of his life in an impossible situation. But he felt proud of his effort to at least try and contribute something that Botswana had to make failed states work. Okay, that's how I would respond to that. I don't think he didn't completely fail, okay? He moved the process along. He didn't get it done, but he didn't have power. He didn't have an army. He didn't have the money of South Africa. But he did move it along to where everyone met at Sun City and came to an agreement. Whether they lived up to that agreement, whether the Congolese got rid of their zero-sum thinking and became patriots, that's another story. Hagiography, the issue of Masire. I mean, President Masire paid me. I'm an admirer of his. I think he's an incredible person. Have you ever met someone who could work 3 jobs full-time for like 40 years without taking a day off? He was amazing. So if I tend towards hagiography, that's where I'm coming from. I think Botswana, under his policies, everyone knows the numbers. They were one of the poorest countries in the world. Now they're middle income. Okay. So yeah, but I'm not uncritical, and I don't think it was my job in this book to go pointing out his shortcomings. Okay, that's not what I was hired to do. I think we all know some of his policies that failed and those that worked. Okay, so I never dwelled on the ones that failed. Did he take the blame for putting President Masire in office? No, he didn't. He didn't take the blame because he was very forthright that he had done the right thing in doing that. And what was the reason? Well, I haven't touched on it, but as you all know, some of the prime combatants in the old factional days were sitting right here. There was the so-called A-team, or the Big Five, and there was Barata Party, etc. And they fought for how long? The last 10 years plus of his presidency, all these guys being in the newspaper every week, attacking each other, and etc., etc. Okay? So, did Serketu Mile really mind the factional system? No. He just thought it was inevitable. Who did President Masire support in the factional system? Well, he supported Mr. Kwela Hobe and Barata Party in his heart, but he never did anything to help them. That wasn't his job. His job was to move the BDP and the government together as a team. So when it came time to work on his successor, he didn't think there was anyone in the Big Five or in Barata Party who deserved to be the president based on their past behavior. Hence, he made these moves that year, these weird concoctions to change the Constitution. Why? Because he didn't think Festus Masire was a self-serving politician. He thought he was the best man for the job, and he never relented from that view. So I hope I have answered your question.
Just comments.
Okay.
We have some questions here. Can we have the mic? Or actually, let me just.
Dumelang ke bidwa eno Lady Teko. I should ride on the eloquent Botsalo Ntuani's commentary. It's quite intriguing that he should be the one to make a critique of the book preliminarily. And I don't think anyone sitting here would doubt that he is a protege of Rahaone. So I think he is very qualified in that respect. I think 2 points I would like to respond to. One, from a writer's point of view, I do not think that when you are commissioned to write somebody's biography, you are necessarily paid to do PR work. However, the story that is being told from the point of view of the one that you are writing about will always be projecting the positive attributes of that person. And if we do agree that human beings have both the positives and the negatives, I think the question to always answer when we write biographies, and I'm speaking as one who has a number of those lined up, the question is, what is it that this person wants to project? There should be a message of inspiration, a message of encouragement to those that would be reading. And that is not to say that the person is a saint. But if there are negatives that are outnumbered by the positives, the writer's job is to project the positive attributes. The last comment also deals with the peace efforts. I don't want to see it as an exercise in futility. I would disagree with my learned intellectual that Mohai had no business in the Congo. I think, Masire, thank you. I think Africa's problems begin and end when statesmen look in that direction, when there is anarchy all over, and they cannot even offer themselves that I can step in. It was quite refreshing, very edifying to hear Thabo Mbeki after the passing of Ranametso Maloba, sharing that they were all not qualified, but Remohai was qualified to step in up north. I think it was Zambia. And when we do have more of our leaders, like Rahaone and Borre Mohai, saying, yes, this is a mission, I am willing to sacrifice myself and offer 1 or 2 lessons from the democratic traditions of Botswana, I think that is commendable. And I would strongly say no. He had every right to intervene. People were massacring each other in the Congo. Thank you.
Just before you, if you are going to revert to that, please may I ask that we keep them short so that we can get a few comments in. Rakangonyana, I think you have a quick one.
Okay, thank you. Wabona Khamanyani Growth Well podcast. And yeah, we had a good chat earlier this week with Barry on the podcast, so it's coming soon in 2 weeks for those interested in more details. But I just wanted to, there's something that we discussed, Barry, I know you don't want to go into too much detail, is the founding of the nation and the twin striking nature of Seseratsakama and Kitumile Masire. Can you just touch slightly on it, because that was quite an amazing how 2 people that complemented each other managed to build one of the most successful projects in Africa. Thank you.
I'll just project. Ketumile and Sir Seretse were like the dream team that Botswana needed when at independence. Okay? They never argued about anything significant, and they both read the situation in the same way. Okay? They believed in nationalism, in creating a spirit of nationalism. Seretse and Masire believed in engendering a sense of nationalism and building the new kraal on the old kraal, which was the Botswana political and agricultural tradition. So they never, in fact, I know Seretse told those around him that me and Quett are like this. Okay? They never varied, and they worked closely their whole lives. Okay? The reason that it worked well was because A, they believed in exactly the same program, and 2, Seretse was a charismatic national hero. Although his health was never good, and so he relied on the relentless energy of Masire to get the Domkrach and government projects done. So they worked perfectly together, and what can I say? It's hard to say more other than it was a dream partnership that never faltered. Two men of like mind who controlled the BDP and the government for 14 years together. I mean, I honestly don't know what more I can say about it, other than that there was never any friction, and they worked hand in glove together, and they complemented each other perfectly. I don't think that's hagiography. I think that's reality.
Oh, this is very loud. I just wanted to make a quick point. I would frame this whole situation a bit differently. I think it's very important for the statesmen of this nation and stateswomen of this nation to get their own voices out. And I think we're blessed that Sir Ketumile, in at least 2 publications, has really done that. No doubt that his legacy is going to be debated by historians for decades to come. But I think that's the real value of this book, and that's the real value of Sir Ketumile reaching out to Barry Morton and also to Stephen Lewis in his previous volume. And I say that because that is what I would like to appeal to too many of our people. I was at one point in talks with Batwain II, but unfortunately he died almost the same day I came back to Botswana. But we've lost so much of the voice of Botswana in these years, and all the different voices. So it's an appeal to really others and to others, to encourage others that this is the kind of books that we really need. And so whether it's hagiography or not, what's really important is to get these voices, and then we can critique these voices, having the genuine voices themselves on record. And so that's why I admire Masire's book, even though it may contradict Mahang, and I admire him for putting his voice out as well.
I'll come to you, Rabashi.
Dumelang, Kesahongwai, a friend of the Botswana Society and a tour guide with the Botswana Society still. My interest is on chapter 1, that no one actually seems to be talking about, the historical MASEPA. And I understand that when you started, you said that it is also, especially on chapter 1, it's to refute and possibly to rebut what the author in chapter 1 has written about Masire, Sir Ketumile Masire in his publications. I happen to be reading one of the first, the author that is referenced in chapter 1. And in the book, I was shocked Yes, I'm still shocked to find out that it says that how Sekitumile Masire, what's the word? Paved way for his successor. Like he alleges, I take it as an allegation so much that you say that you come into a refute, especially looking at chapter 1, that he was the author says that he was in debt, like there was some sort of allegiance or whatever was formed to have him, well, make way for his successor. So I don't know if it's something that you touch in chapter 1 specifically, or because the book is there, like it came after the demise of Are Sekitumile. I don't know if you have seen it or if you have read it, or the history surrounding his time of exiting office.
You're asking me why Sekitumile exited office in 1998. Well, there's many facts and so-called facts about his exit from office. As to which ones are true, it's often hard to know. However, essentially, using the Botswana phrase, he got tired. You can take that to mean it's many different meanings. And so he probably would have retired earlier had the factional wars not been as fierce as they were. Now, Sekitumile has been alleged by many people that he refused to relinquish office because he needed the money to stay in office and he was broke. Like everything, there's a grain of truth, but it wasn't really the truth. Sekitumile he didn't enrich himself in office, but he was never broke. He always had significant assets that he could draw upon at any time. And his business interests, which he neglected by being a servant of the people for 30 plus years, never produced as much money as they should have if he was doing them full time. So at times he was short, at times he was illiquid, but that's not really what guided his decision to leave office. I think had not the party factions gone on, I think he may have exited early, but I think 1998, he was tired and he had identified Festus Mogai as someone he believed was his perfect replacement.
Good afternoon, Barry. Good to see you again. A question that I have for you is, how did you approach this assignment? I know you were very forthright in the beginning to say that this was a man that you admired, but what is the process that you went through? How long did it take you to write the book? And at the end, do you feel that as a historian you have done justice to the voice and to the period that you are covering? Do you have any regrets through this process? And having spent so much time, I'd like to think with Masire, did he have any regrets towards the end of his life, at least the stage that you spent with him? Thank you.
Sekitumile had no regrets. None. He wasn't worried about, rethinking past decisions. What was my process? That's a difficult question. The fact of the matter is Sekitumile died before we'd completed all our work together because I had to go back and move to a new house. So I wanted to bring forward what he wanted to say, and then I had to try and bring forward the essence of, I think, things that were unrecognized about him and his time that would be relevant to a current audience. And I think that's why I came up with the framework of the Minds of Masire. Because we're looking at a man who worked 3 full-time jobs from 4 in the morning till 2 a.m. at night for decades without ever stopping. And how did he do that? And he did it by compartmentalizing his mind. So if you knew him doing one thing, you definitely didn't know him doing another thing. Okay? So even while I was working with him, this is what brought me to this realization. We were spending hours talking together. We'd drive to his farm, blah, blah, blah. That was for hours. And then about a year later, I started talking to other informants, President Masire, some others, who were telling me that at the exact moment that I was doing all these interviews, President Masire was staying up all night and into the wee hours of the morning, working hard to make sure that Masisi went into the vice presidency and not Ian's brother. So they were spending hours and weeks fighting hard, doing political infighting or whatever to make sure Masisi became Ian's successor and not Tsekedi. But he never mentioned one word of this to me while we were talking, even though we were talking for hours on end. I had no idea. That's the kind of guy he was. So if you knew him in BDP or you knew him in government, you didn't know what he was doing because he was that energetic and he compartmentalized and he didn't give his cards away easily. Okay, so I think I can't explain it any better than that. And yeah, it probably took me until I talked to President Masire, the whole idea of the structure of the book came into view the minute I talked to him like that. Okay. Is that who I think it is?
It is. That's exactly who you think it is.
Yeah, man. Well, how's it going?
Hi, Barry. Good to see you, man. My name is Thapelo Nteta. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments around, I think Masire was one of the greatest statesmen that we've ever had. I think it's essential that people in his position need to tell their story before they go, and we need to document it from their perspective, whatever perspective it is, but they need to tell their story. I think it's important, and they all need to do it. There was talk also about how well Khama and Masire worked together. And I don't know whether that is really such a good thing. You know, you need to have someone in your camp who you respect but challenges you all the time, right, in a respectful way, so that you can steer things in an alternate direction if there need be. I suspect that we might find that at the time that they were in office, or president and vice president, maybe the country was on a trajectory that even if a couple of monkeys were running the country, we would still ended up where we were. You get me? We don't know that. And I know those Wabona and Bashi would know about in organizations and strategic planning. People will do strategic plans, shelve them. The company goes on to do great. And then the whole executive team is busy high-fiving themselves, saying that, wow, we're such great strategists. We managed to pull that off, when in fact they would have done it whether they were there or not. One of the things that really endeared me to Masire was his national vision, the fact that he was a man of vision. I firmly believe that, democracy in Africa doesn't work. Okay, it has to be applied in certain places, but certainly not when it comes to running the country. And this is why all the leaders, Masire included, will end up just getting exhausted from all the infighting because of this party political nonsense that goes on in government. We need to separate that at some point. And for me, the national vision was the way to do that. At the end of the day, we all want to go the same thing. As many political parties as we have, if you ask them, quite honestly, obviously, we're all trying to get to the same place. Everyone just has a different plan. So one party comes into power, and they decide that, no, I don't like the policies that these guys put in. they pull them down and put their own, but they're all heading in the same direction. So we keep taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back with this whole party political system. And I was really hoping that this vision would catch on and catch fire and take us somewhere. So my question really is, was there any agreement between Mogai and Masire about continuing the national vision? Or was there any discussion amongst them about it? And how did it end up, just flying off in the wind? Thank you. Thank you.
The answer is no. There was no agreement, When it was time to hand over to Mogai, you retire and let him do his job. There was no giving advice, or there was no transition plan. He picked someone who he had groomed to move into his spot, so it was that simple. I would also say what you were talking about at the beginning. I mean, the reason that I say Masire was the most important person in the Republic of Botswana's history is because he set up the framework of the ship of state that went forward and was successful. He's the one who negotiated the Constitution. He wrote the BDP Constitution. He ran the Ministry of Finance that your own father was a part of, that was driving the country forward for a couple decades, correct? I mean, he was really the driving force in all of that legislation. So I think, for me, that's why he needs to be recognized, okay? And I hope I've answered your query.
Okay, we're going to close it off soon. We have some refreshments and Barry is around, so we can continue to engage with him there. So I think 1 or 2 more questions, comments, queries, and then we'll close it off. Do we have any hands? None? Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Victor. I'm from Ngamiland. You described Masire's autobiography as dry. What are some of the things that you wished he could have opened up about?
Why did I describe his autobiography as dry? Because it sounded too much like his own voice. When people talk, it doesn't necessarily translate well onto the page. And 2, I don't think he was always I don't think in that autobiography, he related facts relating to his experiences quite honestly, but I think he kept a lot of things close to the chest. So I wasn't interested in revisiting material that he had in his autobiography. What's the point? You have to bring something new and interesting. So I tried not to cover any old ground, and that's what I hope that I've done.
Do we have any more questions, comments, queries? Going once, twice. On this note, I'm going to ask do we call you ONSEC now, or you Vice Chair? Which title do we have now for you, Prof? Please, let's give Dr. Barry a huge round of applause, and thank you so very much for being part of us this afternoon. His book, like we said, is available for sale. 400 Pula. It is available at the door outside, and you will be able to still get it with the Botswana Society. But if you're trying to get an autograph, I believe today is the last day. Dr. Morton heads back to the US tomorrow. So thank you very much. I think you can step down. All right, and then I will ask Professor Fred to just come and give us a vote of thanks and close off our occasion.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to see such a great variety of folks here. members and interested members of the public, and I hope the next time I see you, you become members of the Botswana Society. Of course, you can easily take care of that business right outside the door. We do have refreshments outside, and I'd like to thank Cephalana Holdings for providing the bounty that you're about to receive. And please feel free to linger and talk with the author, who, as you can imagine, I have a degree of sympathy with and pride as well. So I hope you enjoyed the program, that you've realized that the Botswana Society is serious when it says we are here to promote Botswana's cultural heritage and many of its diverse aspects. And we've been at it for nearly six decades, and the prospects of continuing are very good. Of course, there's a lot more we could do with more support. And again, I reiterate what our outgoing vice chair has said, and others and our honorary treasurer, that we do still depend on member contributions to the society, even though we are making every effort to become self-sustaining through our tours, through our publications, through our merchandise, and through the courses that we develop in training the future heritage tourism guides in this country. So also those who are outgoing members of the board, we thank you sincerely for your contribution. And that doesn't mean that you are uninvited to return to join with us as we deliberate on the forthcoming year. So that by next year, we hope to have lots more to report and be proud to have been a part of with our many partners. So with those few words, again, Barry, thank you for the book and the presentation and the rich conversations that you've generated. And I think we're all in your debt. Thank you very much. I'll see you outside.